Aero Spacelines was founded in 1960 by John M. Conroy. Aero Spacelines was formed with only one customer in mind, NASA. NASA needed to transport oversized objects like rocket boosters. The problem was, at the time, there was no airplane capable of transporting the huge parts. They could not be transported by rail or truck due to the massive size, and using barge was too costly and time-consuming. NASA needed a solution. Conroy and his partner, aircraft salesman Lee Mansdorf, thought about solutions. One night over dinner, Mansdorf and Conroy thought of making a large airplane called the Guppy. They decided to create a company that specializes in manufacturing oversized aircraft. Conroy hired Robert W. Lillibridge as vice president of engineering and manufacturing. They assembled a team to carry out the project. Financing was obtained from World War II veteran William Balloon. Aero Spacelines was based out of Van Nuys Airport in California, and with that, they began their first project. Project 1, the Pregnant Guppy. In 1960, Aero Spacelines began work on their first project. This was the Pregnant Guppy. During this time, North American Airlines started to get rid of their piston engine fleet, which had recently become outdated by the arrival of modern jetliners. Conroy's partner, Mansdorf, had been stockpiling old Boeing 377 Stratocruisers to be resold as freighters. But Conroy realized that these 377s could be transformed to be capable of transporting the large but light rocket parts. Conroy presented the plans to convert a Stratocruiser to suit their needs, but one official stated that the bloated aircraft looked like a pregnant guppy, hence the name. Although NASA was lukewarm on the concept, Conroy was able to found Aero Spacelines International to build, operate, and maintain the aircraft. The conversion was undertaken by Onmark Engineering. The airplane used Pan Am airframe, a 5-meter/16-foot section from a British Overseas Airway 377 was added to the fuselage right behind the wings. A 6-meter diameter upper fuselage was added, giving the Pregnant Guppy a unique triple bubble appearance. The entire tail section and rear control surfaces were detachable to allow the loading of cargo. The wings, cockpit, and engines were left unchanged. The aircraft took its first flight on the 19th of September 1962, with Conroy and Clay Lacey at the controls. When the Van Nuys air traffic controllers realized that they were going to take off, they notified the police and fire department, but the aircraft returned to the airport without issue. The aircraft flew until 1964, when it was sold to American Jet Industries. Although it was originally planned to renovate and return the aircraft to service, it was in such poor condition that it was decided in 1979 to scrap the aircraft. But that was not the end of the Guppy line. Part 2, Super Guppy/Super Guppy Turbine. The second plane produced by Aero Spacelines was the Super Guppy. This was a larger Pregnant Guppy built on a C-97J fuselage. The fuselage was lengthened to 141 feet, and a 25-foot bubble was added to the upper deck. Compared to the Pregnant Guppy that used R-4360 twin Wasp piston engines, the Super Guppy used Pratt & Whitney T-34 turboprop engines. On September 25, 1965, after months of construction and tests, the first Super Guppy had a roof collapse. Starting a dive at 10,000 feet and carrying 3,000 sacks of borite, the upper fuselage/bubble collapsed. With the help from a DC-9 chase plane, the wounded Guppy was able to land on a dried lake. It was repaired and redesigned at Edwards Air Force Base and flew again. 5 Super Guppies of both models were built. Only one continues to fly. Part 3, Mini Guppy/Mini Guppy Turbine. The smallest aircraft that Aero Spacelines produced was the Mini Guppy. This had a much smaller bubble on the top fuselage and was not lengthened like the other Guppy aircraft were. The Mini Guppy turbine was the same as the Mini Guppy, but had turboprop engines instead of the piston engines that the Mini Guppy had. Now, with the aircraft that they built out of the way, what about the ones that never got built? Part 4, Never Built Concepts. Aero Spacelines had a few aircraft that were proposed but not built, so let's cover those too. The first is the Colossal Guppy. This would have been built on a B-52 airframe. The B-52 would be cut into 3 sections: the cockpit, main fuselage, and tail. The main fuselage would be scrapped and an entirely new fuselage would be built. The cockpit and wing sections, as well as the tail, would be tacked on. The wings would also be cut in 2, with the new middle section containing an engine pod would be installed. Needless to say, this was not built. Next up is the Princess Guppy. In 1964, a United States scrap merchant purchased the abandoned Saunders Roe Princess flying boats. This included one complete airframe and two uncompleted airframes. Around this time, aero spacelines showed interest in purchasing the massive flying boats. They planned to remove the hull, add landing gear, and a larger fuselage, and add jet engines to complement the 6 massive turboprops that were already installed on the plane. This was proposed to transport the last of the Saturn rocket parts. This turned out to be insane, and the Princess boats were instead scrapped. Third is the Princess Guppy jet. At the same time, Aero Spacelines wanted to convert the 2 uncompleted Princess hulls into an absolute monstrosity. This concept would be 2 times as large as the previously proposed Princess Guppy. It would also include 8 jet engines and doors that would slide open like an aircraft hangar. It would be able to transport an entire rocket. Again, this was not built and the project was scrapped. And finally, there was a plan to convert B-36 bombers into Guppies. There's not much known about the B-36 Guppy, but it was to be converted like the 377s were converted to the Super Guppy, with a large upper bubble installed above the main fuselage. This was proposed near the end of the B-36 lifespan, but it was not built and the airframes that were to be converted were scrapped. Part 5. Every Aero Spacelines plane and its fate. Here is every Guppy airplane built and its fate. The first mini Guppy turbine crashed in 1970. It was damaged beyond repair, written off, and scrapped. The second mini Guppy is preserved at the Tillamook Air Museum. The only pregnant Guppy was scrapped in 1979. Super Guppy N940NS is preserved at the Pima Air and Space Museum. Super Guppy turbine FBTGV was scrapped in 2020. Only the cockpit remains. Super Guppy turbine FBPPA is displayed at a museum in France. Super Guppy turbine FGDSG is at display in Airbus in Germany. Super Guppy turbine N941NA is operational with NASA. This is the last Boeing 377 still in operation. And lastly, this wasn't produced by Aero Spacelines, but was produced by its successor, Conroy. And this is the Conroy Sky Monster, built out of a Canadair CL-44. This is stored at Bournemouth International Airport. Before I sign out, I'd like to thank allaboutguppies.com for allowing me to use the photos of the Guppy with the roof caved in. This really means a lot. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe it, as it really helps me out. And with that, peace out, everybody.